The radio crackled with static at 3:47 hours, breaking the pre-dawn silence of forward operating base Kestrel. Major Ezra Ghost, Voss sat in the cramped ready room, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. At 43, she was considered ancient by fighter pilot standards, her graying temples earning snickers from the 20-something hotshots who called her Grandma behind her back. They didn't know about the 17 confirmed kills tattooed invisibly on her soul, or the reason she'd earned the call sign that made grown men shiver. The emergency klaxon pierced the air like a banshee's wail. Operations Officer Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hendricks burst through the ready room doors, his face pale as moonlight. "We've got a situation. Reconnaissance drone went dark over Serpent's Canyon 15 minutes ago. Last telemetry showed multiple heat signatures moving through the pass." Ghost's steel-gray eyes never left her coffee cup. The younger pilots scrambled to their feet, adrenaline surging through their veins like liquid fire. Captain Jake "Bulldog" Morrison, all swagger and testosterone, stepped forward. "Sir, my F-16 can be wheels up in 10 minutes. I'll paint those targets and be back before breakfast." Hendricks shook his head, his jaw tight as a piano wire. "Negative. This isn't a standard sweep. Intelligence suggests we're looking at advanced surface-to-air missiles, possibly Russian-made Pantsers. The canyon walls create a natural radar shadow that'll mask their signatures until you're already in the envelope." The room fell silent. Serpent's Canyon was a death trap, a narrow gorge that wound through the mountains like a snake's belly. High walls on both sides, limited egress routes, and now potentially filled with enough firepower to turn any aircraft into expensive confetti. The hotshots suddenly found their boots very interesting to study. "We need someone who can thread the needle," Hendricks continued, his eyes scanning the room. "Someone who understands terrain masking, who can fly nap of the earth through that canyon without triggering every sensor from here to Damascus." Ghost finally looked up, her expression unreadable as carved granite. She'd flown A-10 Thunderbolt IIs for 15 years, earning her reputation in the sandboxes of Iraq and Afghanistan. The Warthog wasn't pretty, wasn't fast, but it was tough as nails and perfect for low-altitude work. More importantly, Ghost knew how to make it dance. "How many friendlies are we talking about?" she asked quietly. 12-man Special Forces team. Call sign Viper 6. They were running reconnaissance when they stumbled into something big. Last communication was a whispered going dark 47 minutes ago. Ghost stood slowly, her movements deliberate as a predator. Somewhere in that canyon, American soldiers were counting heartbeats, praying someone would come for them. The young pilots watched her with mixture of doubt and desperate hope, not knowing they were witnessing the awakening of a legend. The mission clock had started ticking. Serpent's Canyon waited. Dawn was still 2 hours away when Ghost walked across the tarmac toward her A-10, the aircraft's distinctive silhouette hunched like a sleeping dragon in the darkness. The Thunderbolt II wasn't built for beauty. It was built for war. Its twin engines mounted high above the fuselage, titanium bathtub protecting the pilot, and that massive GAU-8 cannon protruding from its nose like a medieval lance. Ghost had flown this particular bird, tail number 790142, through 3 combat deployments. They understood each other. Staff Sergeant Riley Kowalski, her crew chief, emerged from beneath the aircraft wiping grease from her hands. "She's ready, Major. Full load of 30 Mike, 4 AGM-65 Mavericks and 2 external fuel tanks. I also loaded some special gifts." She patted a cluster of white phosphorus rockets mounted on the outer pylons. Ghost nodded, running her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Every rivet, every panel, every connection point. In the canyon, there would be no second chances, no friendly airfields for emergency landings. Either she brought those boys home, or she didn't come back at all. Captain Morrison appeared beside the aircraft, his earlier bravado replaced by something resembling humility. Major, maybe I should. You should stay here and learn something, Ghost interrupted, not looking up from her inspection. This isn't about who's fastest or who has the newest toy. It's about experience, and you don't have enough to fill a thimble. The words stung because they were true. Morrison had never flown combat missions where every decision meant the difference between coming home to family or coming home in a box. He'd never felt the weight of other people's lives hanging on his ability to thread an aircraft through impossible spaces at impossible speeds. Ghost climbed into the cockpit, her movements fluid despite the bulk of her flight suit and survival gear. The familiar smell of hydraulic fluid and rubber enveloped her like an old friend's embrace. She began the startup sequence, engines whining to life with their characteristic whistle. The A-10's sound was unlike any other aircraft, not the sharp scream of a fighter jet, but something deeper, more menacing. "Tower, this is Ghost One requesting immediate departure," she transmitted, her voice calm as still water. "Ghost One Tower, you are cleared for takeoff. Weather shows increasing winds in the target area, gusts up to 30 knots. Recommend you reconsider this mission profile." Ghost's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. 30-knot crosswinds in a canyon barely wider than her wingspan. The tower controller clearly didn't know who he was talking to. During her second tour in Afghanistan, she'd landed a battle-damaged A-10 in a dust storm with one engine out and half her right wing missing. "Tower, Ghost One, I didn't come this far to turn around because of a little breeze." She advanced the throttles, feeling two General Electric TF-34 engines respond with their throaty growl. The Warthog began its roll down the runway, slowly building speed. It wasn't graceful, wasn't elegant, but it was inexorable. The eastern horizon showed the first pale hints of dawn as Ghost lifted off into the pre-morning darkness, banking southwest toward the mountains and whatever waited in Serpent's Canyon. Ghost climbed to 8,000 feet as she approached the mountain range, the A-10's engines settling into their familiar rumble. Below, the landscape transformed from flat desert into jagged peaks that clawed at the sky like broken teeth. Serpent's Canyon carved its way through the heart of the range, invisible from this altitude but burned into her memory from countless intelligence briefings. "Ghost One, this is Overwatch," came the voice of Major Angela Santos, the mission controller. "We're showing you approaching the target area. Be advised, we've lost all satellite coverage in the canyon due to atmospheric interference. You'll be flying blind once you enter the AO." Flying blind. Ghost had done it before, using nothing but instinct and the feel of air currents against her aircraft's skin. The A-10 was surprisingly sensitive for such a brutish machine, responding to minute control inputs like a well-trained horse responding to its rider's touch. "Overwatch, Ghost One, understood. What's the latest on Viper 6? Static filled her headset for several seconds. When Santos spoke again, her voice carried the weight of bad news. "No contact for 1 hour, 17 minutes. Last position was grid 41 SMD 23,847, 15,692, approximately 2 clicks into the canyon. Intelligence suggests they encountered a larger force than anticipated." Ghost checked her navigation system. Grid 41 SMD 23,847, 15,692, put Viper 6 halfway through the canyon's narrowest section, where the walls rose nearly vertical for 800 feet on both sides. It was a natural ambush point, and if the enemy had been smart enough to position anti-aircraft weapons at both ends. She pushed the thought away. Speculation was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Ghost One, be advised we're showing multiple radar contacts approximately 15 clicks north of your position. Appears to be a flight of fast movers, possibly MiG-29s." Ghost's blood chilled. MiG-29s meant this operation was bigger than anyone had suspected. Those weren't insurgents with shoulder-fired missiles. This was a coordinated military action involving state actors. The 12 men of Viper 6 had stumbled into something that could spark an international incident. Overwatch, any guidance on rules of engagement? Ghost 1, you are authorized to defend yourself and recover American personnel by any means necessary. Command is very clear. We don't leave anyone behind. The radio fell silent as Ghost began her descent toward the canyon mouth. At 2,000 feet, she could see the entrance clearly, a dark slit in the mountainside that seemed to swallow light itself. The walls were weathered sandstone and granite, carved by millennia of flash floods and geological upheaval, ancient and unforgiving. She switched to the emergency frequency used by Special Operations Forces. Viper 6, this is Ghost 1. If you can hear me, I'm coming to get you. Stay low and stay quiet. No response, only static and the whisper of wind across her canopy. Ghost pushed the stick forward, diving toward the canyon entrance at 300 knots. The walls rushed up to meet her like closing jaws, and suddenly she was inside Serpent's Canyon, flying through a corridor of stone barely wider than a city street. The canyon walls rose on both sides like the ribs of some massive fossil, their surfaces scarred by centuries of erosion. Ghost flew at 150 feet above the canyon floor, her altitude limited by the terrain and the need to avoid potential radar detection. The A-10 responded to every micro-adjustment of the controls, dancing between the stone walls with mechanical grace. Ghost 1, Overwatch. We're showing you entering the canyon. How's your visibility down there? Limited but manageable, Ghost replied, her eyes constantly scanning the rim lines above. The perfect place for anti-aircraft positions would be on the high ground, where weapons could fire down into the canyon with impunity. I'm seeing some debris on the canyon floor. Could be wreckage. She was lying. The canyon floor was clear, but admitting that would mean acknowledging the growing probability that Viper 6 had been captured or worse. In her experience, hope was sometimes more valuable than truth. The canyon began a gradual turn to the left, the walls closing in even tighter. Ghost reduced power slightly, her speed dropping to 200 knots. In this confined space, too much speed would be as deadly as enemy fire. She needed precision, not velocity. A glint of sunlight off metal caught her eye, something on the eastern rim, approximately 2 o'clock high. Ghost banked slightly right, trying to get a better look without exposing her aircraft's profile to whatever might be up there. The object was too far away to identify visually, but it was definitely man-made. Overwatch, Ghost 1. I've got a possible contact on the eastern rim, bearing 090 relative. Recommend you task a satellite if you can get one. Negative, Ghost 1. All assets are dark in your area. You're our eyes and ears. Ghost felt the familiar tightening in her stomach that preceded combat. 15 years of flying had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming danger. Something was wrong with this picture. The canyon was too quiet, too empty. Even birds avoided flying through places like this during daylight hours. She continued her flight path, following the snake-like curves of the canyon deeper into the mountains. The walls seemed to grow higher with each passing minute, blocking out more and more of the sky until she was flying through a slot of blue barely 50 feet wide. Then she heard it, a faint transmission on the emergency frequency, broken and barely audible through the static. OST-1, Viper under heavy, need immediate. The transmission cut off abruptly, but it was enough. Viper 6 was alive, and they were in trouble. Ghost advanced the throttles slightly, the A-10 surging forward through the stone corridor like a predator scenting blood. Time was running out for everyone in Serpent's Canyon. Ghost's radar warning receiver suddenly came alive, its urgent beeping filling the cockpit like an electronic heartbeat. Multiple surface-to-air missile systems had just painted her aircraft with their targeting radars, at least 3 distinct signatures, possibly more. The canyon had become a kill box, and she was flying directly into its center. Overwatch Ghost 1. I'm being illuminated by multiple SAM sites. This isn't a coincidence. Someone knew we were coming. The silence on the radio lasted too long. When Santos finally responded, her voice carried the weight of terrible realization. Ghost One, we're seeing the same thing. Intelligence failure. This was a trap. Ghost's mind raced through the tactical situation. Viper 6 had been sent in to conduct reconnaissance, but instead they'd walked into an ambush designed to draw and rescue assets. Now she was the prize, a $40 million aircraft and an experienced pilot that enemy forces could use for propaganda or bargaining leverage. The smart play would be to abort, climb out of the canyon, and call for backup. Wait for the cavalry in the form of F-16s and Apache that could sanitize the area with overwhelming firepower. But smart plays didn't save the lives of 12 American soldiers who were counting on her to extract them from hell. Ghost One, recommend you abort and egress immediately, came Overwatch's voice. We'll coordinate a larger rescue package. Negative, Ghost replied, her voice steady as stone. Those boys don't have time for a committee meeting. She pushed the stick forward, descending even lower into the canyon. At 50 feet above the deck, she was below the minimum engagement altitude for most surface-to-air missiles, but she was also completely committed to the terrain. If something went wrong now, there would be nowhere to run. The canyon floor was littered with boulders the size of houses, evidence of rock slides and flash floods that had carved this passage over geological time. Ghost wove between them, the A-10's wings sometimes passing within feet of stone obstacles. Her aircraft became an extension of her nervous system, responding to minute control inputs as if reading her thoughts. Another transmission crackled through her headset, clearer this time. Ghost 1, Viper 6 actual, grid 41, Mike, Tango 77, requesting immediate extract. Wounded. The coordinates placed them approximately one click ahead, where the canyon opened into a natural amphitheater before narrowing again into its deepest section. If the enemy had chosen their ambush site carefully, and everything suggested they had, Viper 6 would be pinned down in that amphitheater with no escape routes. Ghost armed her A-10 cannon, the massive gun spinning up with its characteristic whine. 3,000 rounds of 30-depleted uranium ammunition, capable of shredding armored vehicles like tissue paper. She also selected two AGM-65 Maverick missiles, their heat-seeking heads already searching for targets. The canyon made another sharp turn, and suddenly the amphitheater opened before her like a natural coliseum. The space was perhaps 200 meters across, surrounded by vertical walls that rose nearly 1,000 feet. In the center, she could see the distinctive shapes of American soldiers pressed flat against what cover they could find among the scattered rocks. And surrounding them, at least 30 enemy fighters with heavy weapons positioned on elevated ridges. Ghost had found Viper 6, now came the hard part. The amphitheater was a killing field, and Ghost was flying directly into the crosshairs of every enemy weapon system. Her radar warning receiver screamed as multiple missiles locked onto her aircraft. But she'd been in worse situations. During the Battle of Kandahar, she'd flown through a cloud of surface-to-air missiles to provide close air support for a surrounded Marine unit. Today felt different, though. More personal. Viper 6, Ghost 1, I have you in sight. Keep your heads down, I'm coming in hot. Ghost pulled the A-10 into a tight left bank, bringing her nose to bear on the eastern ridgeline where she could see the muzzle flashes of enemy rifles. The GAU-8 cannon roared to life, sending a stream of depleted uranium rounds into the rocks at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. Each projectile hit with the force of a small artillery shell, turning stone into deadly fragments that filled the air like shrapnel. Enemy fighters scattered like insects, some diving for cover while others tried to track her aircraft with their weapons. Ghost rolled inverted, pulling negative GS as she dove toward the canyon floor, then leveled out barely 20 feet above the rocks. The A-10 could take massive damage and keep flying. Titanium armor around the cockpit, redundant flight systems, engines mounted high to avoid ground fire. Ghost 1, you've got multiple shoulder-fired missiles in the air, came Santos's voice through her headset. Recommend evasive maneuvers. Ghost could see them, white smoke trails arcing up from various positions around the amphitheater. She popped flares, the bright magnesium decoys falling like burning stars as they tried to seduce the heat-seeking missiles away from her engines. One missile took the bait, exploding harmlessly 50 meters behind her aircraft. Another kept tracking. She pulled hard right, the G-forces crushing her into her seat as the A-10 clawed around a massive boulder. The missile impacted the stone where she'd been seconds before, sending a geyser of rock fragments into the air. Her aircraft shuddered as debris peppered the fuselage, but everything felt solid. Viper 6 actual, what's your status? She transmitted while lining up for another gun run. Ghost 1 Viper 6. We've got 3 urgent surgical, 2 routine. Need immediate case vac. Enemy forces are closing on our position from 3 directions. 3 urgent surgical meant 3 soldiers with wounds that would kill them without immediate medical attention. Ghost's jaw tightened. She needed to clear this canyon and get a medical helicopter in here, but first she had to eliminate enough enemy fighters to make that possible. She rolled left, bringing her nose onto the western ridgeline, where a heavy machine gun position was raking the area around Viper 6 with steady bursts of fire. The Maverick missile's seeker head locked onto the heat signature of the gun barrel, and Ghost squeezed the trigger. The missile streaked away from her aircraft like a vengeful angel, impacting the machine gun position in a ball of orange flame and black smoke. But for every enemy position she destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. This wasn't a random ambush. It was a carefully planned operation with significant resources behind it. Ghost was beginning to understand that getting Viper 6 out alive might require more than just superior flying skills. It might require a miracle. The amphitheater had become a 3-dimensional chess game played at 300 miles per hour, with Ghost as the sole knight trying to protect a surrounded king. Enemy fighters had taken positions at multiple elevations along the canyon walls, creating overlapping fields of fire that left virtually no safe space for the trapped Special Forces team. Ghost pulled into a vertical climb, trading airspeed for altitude as she sought to engage the highest enemy positions. The A-10 climbed sluggishly under the weight of its remaining ordnance, but it climbed steadily. At 800 feet above the canyon floor, she rolled inverted and dove toward a cluster of enemy fighters who had made the mistake of grouping together on a narrow ledge. The GAU-8 cannon spoke again, its distinctive BRRRRT echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. The ledge disintegrated under the impact of 30mm rounds, taking the enemy position with it. But the victory was short-lived. Ghost's aircraft shuddered as small arms fire from a dozen different positions found its mark. Warning lights illuminated her instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure was dropping in the secondary system, and she could feel the aircraft becoming slightly sluggish in roll. Nothing critical yet, but the damage was accumulating. The A-10 was designed to absorb punishment, but it wasn't invincible. Viper 6, I need you to mark your exact position with infrared strobes. I'm having trouble distinguishing you from the bad guys down there. Within seconds, Ghost could see the distinctive flashing signatures of IR strobes through her night vision system. Viper 6 was clustered behind a formation of house-sized boulders at the southern edge of the amphitheater, approximately 30 meters from where the canyon narrowed again. The enemy had them effectively pinned down, with overlapping fields of fire from multiple directions. A new voice crackled through her headset, young, strained, but professional. Ghost 1, this is Viper 6 Romeo. Master Sergeant Blake Morrison, forward air controller. I can talk your guns onto these targets if you can give me close support. Morrison. Ghost's mind made the connection instantly. This had to be a relative of Captain Jake Morrison back at the base. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was risking her life to save someone connected to the hotshot pilot who'd questioned her ability just hours earlier. Viper 6 Romeo, Ghost 1. Go ahead with your target description. Ghost 1, I've got a heavy weapons position at bearing 045 degrees from my location, approximately 50 meters. Looks like a recoilless rifle or light mortar. They're getting ready to drop rounds right on top of us. Ghost banked left, searching for the target Morrison had described. There, a slight depression in the rocks where she could see the distinctive shape of a mortar tube being adjusted by enemy fighters. They were preparing for indirect fire, which would make Viper 6's position untenable. Viper 6 Romeo, I have the target. Danger close. Keep everyone's heads down. Ghost lined up her shot, compensating for wind drift and the movement of her aircraft. At this range, firing danger close to friendly forces required precision that left no margin for error. 1 degree too far left or right, and she'd be killing American soldiers instead of saving them. The GAU-8 cannon fired a 2-second burst, approximately 135 rounds of depleted uranium. The mortar position vanished in a cloud of smoke and flying rock fragments. But even as Ghost celebrated the successful engagement, her radar warning receiver began screaming again. Someone had just locked onto her aircraft with a much more sophisticated system than the shoulder-fired missiles she'd been dodging. Somewhere in Serpent's Canyon, a very dangerous hunter had just joined the game. The radar signature was unlike anything Ghost had encountered before, sophisticated, powerful, and definitely not shoulder-fired. Her electronic warfare suite identified it as a possible SA-22 Greyhound, a Russian-made system capable of engaging targets at ranges exceeding 20 kilometers. If that identification was correct, she was facing a weapons system that could reach out and touch her aircraft from well beyond visual range. Overwatch Ghost 1. I'm being painted by what appears to be an SA-22 system. This is way beyond the capabilities we were briefed to expect. The response came immediately, and Santos's voice carried a new edge of concern. Ghost 1, we're seeing the same signature. Intelligence is scrambling to figure out how that system got into the area. Recommend immediate egress. Ghost glanced down at Viper 6's position through her targeting system. 3 men with life-threatening wounds, 9 others depending on her to clear a path for extraction. The nearest friendly forces were over 200 kilometers away, and medical evacuation helicopters couldn't operate in a threat environment this intense. Negative Overwatch, I'm not leaving these boys. The SA-22's radar continued its electronic probing, searching for the optimal firing solution. Ghost knew the system's capabilities. It could engage multiple targets simultaneously and had a high probability of kill against aircraft like hers. But it also had limitations. The missile needed several seconds to reach its target, and those seconds created opportunities for a skilled pilot. Ghost dropped even lower, using the canyon walls and scattered boulders as radar shadows. The A-10's profile disappeared intermittently from the SA-22's coverage as she wove between obstacles, but she couldn't hide forever. Eventually, she'd need to expose herself to engage the remaining enemy positions. Viper 6 Romeo, I need an accurate count of enemy forces still active around your position. Master Sergeant Morrison's voice came back immediately. Ghost 1, I'm counting at least 20 fighting positions still active, maybe more. They've got us bracketed from 3 sides, and they're starting to coordinate their fire. 20 positions. Even if Ghost could eliminate half of them, the remaining enemy fighters would still have enough firepower to prevent any rescue attempt. She needed to change the tactical equation, and she needed to do it quickly before her aircraft accumulated too much damage to continue fighting. Ghost pulled up her ordnance status display. 1 Maverick missile remaining, approximately 800 rounds of 30mm ammunition, and 4 white phosphorus rockets. Not enough to eliminate 20 enemy positions, but possibly enough to create the conditions for extraction if she used them intelligently. Viper 6 Romeo, I need you to prepare your team for movement. I'm going to create a smoke screen that should mask your position long enough for you to displace to the canyon exit. Ghost 1, negative. We've got 3 litter cases who can't move under their own power. Ghost's heart sank. Wounded soldiers who couldn't walk meant the extraction would take much longer, exposing everyone to additional risk. But there was no choice. American soldiers didn't get left behind, regardless of the tactical situation. The SA-22's radar lock suddenly intensified, indicating an imminent missile launch. Ghost had perhaps 10 seconds before things got very complicated. She armed her remaining white phosphorus rockets, selected ripple fire, and dove toward the center of the amphitheater. Ghost's finger found the weapon's release button as the SA-22's launch warning filled her headset with its urgent tone. Time compressed into a crystal-clear moment of absolute focus, target picture, weapons parameters, friendly positions, threat assessment, all processed in the span of a heartbeat. The white phosphorus rockets rippled away from her aircraft in rapid succession, their smoke trails drawing perfect lines through the canyon air toward predetermined impact points. Ghost had calculated the firing solution to create a wall of white smoke between Viper 6 and the majority of enemy positions, buying precious minutes for movement. Then the missile warning changed to launch detection, and Ghost's world transformed into a high-speed geometry problem where the wrong answer meant death. She pulled hard left, diving toward the canyon floor while deploying every countermeasure her aircraft carried. Flares blossomed like deadly flowers, chaff clouds filled the air with metallic confetti, and her electronic warfare suite pumped out jamming signals across multiple radar frequencies. The SA-22's missile was a sophisticated piece of Russian engineering, designed to defeat exactly the kind of countermeasures Ghost was employing. It ignored the flares, burned through the chaff, and adjusted its trajectory to compensate for her evasive maneuvers. But it hadn't been designed to engage targets flying at 50 feet above ground level through a canyon barely wide enough for its fins to clear the walls. Ghost flew her aircraft into the narrowest part of the canyon, where the walls were separated by less than 100 feet. The missile, tracking at nearly Mach 3, couldn't adjust quickly enough to the radical change in terrain. It impacted the eastern canyon wall in a spectacular fireball that sent rock fragments cascading down like deadly rain. Ghost 1 Overwatch, confirm your status. Still alive and still fighting, Ghost replied, though her aircraft was now showing multiple warning lights. The missile's proximity detonation had damaged several systems, and she could feel the A-10 flying differently, heavier on the controls, less responsive. The white phosphorus rockets had done their job perfectly. Thick white smoke now filled the amphitheater, obscuring visibility and creating a temporary tactical advantage for Viper 6. Ghost could hear Morrison coordinating his team's movement through the radio. Ghost 1, Viper 6 Romeo. We're moving to the rally point. Need approximately 6 minutes to get our wounded positioned for extraction. 6 minutes. Ghost checked her fuel status and weapons remaining. She had perhaps 10 minutes of fighting time left before she'd be forced to egress for fuel. And somewhere in the canyon, the SA-22 system was probably already repositioning for another shot. But something else was bothering her, the level of coordination she was seeing from enemy forces. This wasn't a random ambush or even a well-planned trap. This was a military operation with sophisticated equipment and professional soldiers. The kind of operation that suggested state sponsorship and significant intelligence preparation. Ghost began to suspect that Viper 6 hadn't stumbled into this situation by accident. Someone had wanted them here, and someone had wanted to draw in American rescue assets. The question was, what was the ultimate objective? As if in answer to her thoughts, her radio crackled with a new transmission, not from Overwatch or Viper 6, but from someone else entirely. American pilot, you are surrounded and outgunned. Land your aircraft immediately and you will be treated according to international law. Ghost's blood chilled. Someone was monitoring their frequencies and they spoke perfect, unaccented English. The voice on the radio was calm, professional, and absolutely confident, the tone of someone who held all the tactical advantages and knew it. Ghost had heard that same tone before, from enemy pilots during her early years flying combat missions. It was the voice of a predator who had cornered his prey. American pilot, this is Colonel Dmitry Volkov, Syrian Air Defense Command. You have 30 seconds to comply with landing instructions, or we will be forced to engage you with additional missile systems. Ghost's mind raced through the implications. Syrian Air Defense Command meant this operation had official government backing. Colonel Volkov's perfect English suggested advanced training, possibly in Russia or with Russian advisors, and his confidence indicated he had assets in play that she hadn't yet encountered. Overwatch, Ghost 1. Did you copy that transmission? Affirmative, Ghost 1. We're analyzing the voice print now. This situation has just escalated beyond local insurgent activity. Below her, the white phosphorus smoke was beginning to dissipate, revealing glimpses of Viper 6's movement toward the canyon exit. Master Sergeant Morrison was coordinating the evacuation with military precision, but 3 wounded soldiers made progress agonizingly slow. They'd covered perhaps 50 meters in the last 2 minutes, not nearly enough to reach safety before the smoke cleared completely. Ghost made a decision that would either save everyone or doom them all. Instead of responding to Colonel Volkov's ultimatum, she switched to a different frequency, one she hoped the enemy wasn't monitoring. Any station, this is Ghost 1 declaring emergency. American forces under attack in Serpent's Canyon. Request immediate support from all available assets. The response came from an unexpected source. Ghost 1, this is Razor Flight, 2 F-16s approximately 40 minutes out. We're burning fuel to reach your position. 40 minutes. Ghost looked at her fuel gauge and weapons status. Her aircraft was damaged, low on ammunition, and flying on fumes. She had perhaps 5 minutes of combat capability remaining before she'd be forced to egress or become another casualty. Razor Flight, Ghost 1. Appreciate the cavalry, but 40 minutes might as well be 40 years. I need to create an extraction window now. Her radar warning receiver erupted again, not just the SA-22 this time, but multiple new contacts. Colonel Volkov hadn't been bluffing. Additional missile systems were powering up throughout the canyon, creating an overlapping network of coverage that would make survival increasingly unlikely. Ghost looked down at Viper 6's position one more time. Morrison and his team were still 70 meters from the canyon exit, moving as fast as humanly possible while carrying their wounded comrades. They needed more time, and she was the only one who could give it to them. She armed her last Maverick missile and selected her remaining 30mm ammunition for continuous fire. If Colonel Volkov wanted her aircraft, he was going to have to work for it. Viper 6 Romeo, Ghost 1. I'm going to draw their attention while you complete your movement. When you reach the exit, pop smoke and I'll vector the medevac helicopter to your position. Ghost 1, that's suicide. You'll never survive against that many missile systems. Ghost's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Romeo, I've been flying suicidal missions for 15 years. Today's just another day at the office. She pushed the throttles forward, climbing toward the canyon rim where Colonel Volkov's missile systems waited like patient spiders in an electronic web. Ghost pulled the A-10 into a climbing turn that carried her up the canyon walls like a mechanical falcon riding thermals toward heaven. Every radar warning receiver in her cockpit screamed as multiple missile systems achieved lock-on, their electronic fingers reaching across the sky to caress her aircraft with deadly intent. Colonel Volkov's trap was sophisticated, layered, and probably inescapable. But Ghost had never been particularly concerned with escape when American lives hung in the balance. At 2,000 feet above the canyon floor, she could see the entire tactical picture spread below her like a three-dimensional chessboard. Enemy positions dotted the rim and canyon walls, their muzzle flashes winking like malevolent stars. Viper 6 was still 60 meters from the extraction point, their progress agonizingly slow as they carried wounded comrades across broken terrain. Ghost 1, multiple missile launches detected, came Overwatch's urgent transmission. Count at least 4 separate systems engaging your aircraft. Ghost could see them, white smoke trails arcing up from concealed positions around the canyon rim, each one representing a several $100,000 piece of Russian engineering designed to swat aircraft from the sky. She deployed chaff and flares in rapid sequence, filling the air around her aircraft with metallic snow and burning magnesium stars. The first missile took the bait, seduced away by the infrared signature of a particularly bright flare. The second ignored her countermeasures entirely, tracking the heat signature of her engines with relentless precision. Ghost pulled into a diving spiral, using the canyon walls to mask her aircraft's profile while the missile closed at Mach 2. At the last possible second, she rolled inverted and dove toward the canyon floor, pulling negative GS that pressed her against her harness straps. The missile, unable to match her sudden change in direction, impacted the northern canyon wall in a shower of granite fragments and orange flame. 2 down, 2 to go. Ghost's aircraft was now deep in the canyon again, but she'd accomplished her objective, drawing enemy attention away from Viper 6's withdrawal route. Her fuel gauge showed critical levels, and warning lights indicated multiple system failures. The A-10 was living up to its reputation for survivability, but even the toughest aircraft had limits. Viper 6 Romeo, what?